Some stories are so unbelievable they sound like something out of a movie. This is one of them. It was a regular Sunday in October 2009, or at least, that's how it started. The heroine of our tale? Kellyanne Walls, a 37-year-old mom from Ross Township, Pennsylvania. She wasn't just an ordinary animal lover. Nope. While most people settle for a dog, maybe a cat or two, Kellyanne went all in. Think lions, tigers, cougars, and a 350-pound black bear named Teddy. For nearly a decade, Teddy wasn't just a pet, he was part of the family. Kellyanne didn't see him as a wild animal. To her, he was just a big, furry buddy who happened to live in a cage out back, and she had cleaned that cage 1,000 times without a single problem. But as fate would have it, October 4th was the day everything changed. That afternoon, Kellyanne grabbed some dog food, her usual trick to keep Teddy occupied while she cleaned. "Here you go, big guy," she might have said, tossing the food to one side of the enclosure. Normally, that was enough to keep him busy. Maybe it was the chill in the air. Maybe it was the fact that hibernation season was around the corner. Or maybe, just maybe, Teddy finally remembered that he was, in fact, a bear. Whatever the reason, something inside him snapped. As Kellyanne stepped into the cage like she had countless times before, Teddy attacked. The scene was nothing short of chaos. Kellyanne's children, frozen in horror, saw the unthinkable unfolding before their eyes. Their mother was in danger, and they did the only thing they could. They ran. As fast as their legs could carry them, they sprinted to their neighbor's house. Enter Scott Caston, local school teacher. When he opened the door to find two panicked kids shouting about a bear, he figured a wild one had wandered into town. Without hesitation, he grabbed his .357 caliber handgun and ran toward the Walls property. What he saw when he got there was far worse than he could have imagined. Teddy was still on the attack. Kellyanne lay unconscious, and the bear wasn't done yet. When Teddy turned his attention toward Scott, the neighbor had a choice: stand there and become the bear's next target or act fast. Instinct kicked in. One shot. The bullet struck Teddy, killing him instantly. With the bear down, Scott rushed to Kellyanne's side and called for help, but it was too late. By the time paramedics arrived, there was nothing they could do. Kellyanne was gone. The news rocked the entire community. She had been more than just an animal lover. She was a gentle, kind-hearted woman who had poured her soul into caring for the creatures she adored. Her funeral was filled with friends, neighbors, and heartbroken family members who couldn't believe such a tragedy had unfolded right in their quiet town. But as the mourning continued, so did the questions. Turns out there were warning signs. For starters, Michael Walls, Kellyanne's husband, had let his permits for keeping exotic animals expire over a year earlier, while officials had previously inspected the enclosures and found no safety issues. The Pennsylvania Game Commission had always made one thing clear: wild animals, no matter how loved, can never be truly tamed. And so, Kellyanne's story became a bittersweet lesson. Her passion for animals was undeniable. Her love for Teddy was real. But in the end, love wasn't enough to override nature's instincts.
The weekend was meant to be a celebration, a gathering of family, love, and milestones. Marika Engelbrecht had returned to a familiar place, a game farm in Limpopo, where the wild stretched endlessly and life moved at nature's rhythm. It was her mother's 50th birthday, a special Mother's Day, and almost impossibly, the first anniversary of her marriage to Juan Engelbrecht. She was 25, young and full of life, with the world ahead of her. No one could have imagined how suddenly, how cruelly it would all be taken away. Early Saturday morning, as the golden African sun cast its first light over the veld, Marika set out on a walk, her two beloved German short-haired pointers, Tasco and Jasha, bounding ahead. They were more than pets to her, they were family. The morning air was crisp, the landscape stretching endlessly before her, a peaceful scene interrupted only by the distant rustling of leaves and the occasional chirp of birds greeting the new day. Then something changed. One of the dogs, perhaps catching a scent, bolted toward a nearby herd of giraffes. The towering creatures stood gracefully in the distance, their long necks swaying gently as they watched the approaching commotion, among them a mother and her calf. Marike, instinct kicking in, rushed forward calling for her dogs. In an instant, everything unraveled. The mother giraffe, sensing a threat, moved swiftly. There was no hesitation, no warning, just raw instinct. Marike, in a desperate attempt to shield her dog, bent down, scooping up the panicked animal. And then the fatal blow. A single powerful kick struck the back of her neck. The impact was instant, merciless. She never had the chance to scream, never had time to run. Her body crumpled to the earth, lifeless before it even touched the ground. Back at the farmhouse, the family was unaware that their world had just shattered. The first sign came when one of the dogs returned, leash still attached, alone. That moment, when joy turned to dread, would be seared into their memories forever. Something was wrong. Visser, her brother, led the frantic search. They moved through the veld, calling her name, hoping, praying. Then they found her. She was still, untouched by trampling, no visible wounds, just the cruel reality of a life stolen in an instant. Her father, Fritz Visser, stood frozen, absorbing the unspeakable truth. His daughter, who had always felt at home in nature, lay motionless on the land she loved. The trackers later confirmed what had happened. The mother giraffe had defended her calf, acting only out of instinct. There was no malice, no rage, just the unforgiving force of the wild. The giraffe was left undisturbed, spared from any retaliation. Juan Engelbrecht, the man who had married Marika just a year earlier, now faced a world without her. Their future, once so bright, had been reduced to memories in the blink of an eye. The life they had built, the dreams they had shared, gone. She gave her life to protect her dogs, Smith, a family member, would later say. It was a tragic twist of fate. Her love for nature, her devotion to her animals, the very things that defined her, had placed her in harm's way. Marike had touched the lives of so many. Her warmth, her kindness, her love for the outdoors. She left behind not just family, but a world that was better because she had been in it. Her journey would end in Sanin, where she would be laid to rest. But in the whispers of the wind through the veld, in the quiet rustling of the trees she loved so much, a part of her would always remain.
The roar of the waterfall echoed through the dense rainforest, its mist hanging in the humid air like a veil. Carl Newman, a 49-year-old man from Waikapu, had spent his life surrounded by the beauty of Hawaii, the land he called home. The winding paths, the towering cliffs, the lush greenery, this was familiar ground. But nature, no matter how well you think you know it, can be as ruthless as it is breathtaking. It was supposed to be an ordinary hike, a peaceful escape into the wild beauty of Maui with a group of acquaintances. The trails near Hana Highway were legendary, a winding passage through paradise itself, lush rainforests, cascading waterfalls, and narrow, treacherous pathways carved into the cliffs. The kind of scenery that could take your breath away in an instant. And in one tragic moment it did. As they made their way along the trail, Carl moved carefully, taking in the view, the endless blue sky stretching above the emerald canopy. Then, in a split second, everything changed. He lost his footing. Maybe it was a misstep. Maybe the ground beneath him gave way. It didn't matter. The moment gravity took hold, there was no stopping it. He plummeted down the jagged cliffside, the sheer force of the fall stealing any chance of survival. 60 feet. That's how far he fell. Long enough for terror to set in, short enough for the brutal impact to be instantaneous. By the time his body came to rest near the base of the waterfall, it was already too late. A call for help sent emergency responders racing to the scene, but reaching Carl was no simple task. The rugged terrain, the towering height of the fall, this was not a place easily accessed. A helicopter had to be brought in just to recover his body, the hum of its blades cutting through the heavy silence that had settled over the forest. Authorities quickly ruled out foul play. It was a tragic accident, a grim reminder of how unforgiving the elements could be, even to those who knew them best. An autopsy was scheduled, but there was no mystery to unravel. A moment's misstep, a cruel twist of fate, and a life was gone. The Maui Police Department extended their condolences, but words could only do so much. The beauty of the Hana Highway remained unchanged, its waterfalls still spilling over the cliffs, its narrow bridges still winding through the rainforest. Travelers would continue to come, drawn by the promise of adventure, by the magic of the island. But Carl's story would serve as a silent warning. Nature does not discriminate. it does not hesitate, and sometimes even paradise has a dark side. Imagine you're on a road trip, taking in the breathtaking beauty of British Columbia, when you stumble upon the Liard River Hot Springs Provincial Park, a hidden gem tucked away in the boreal forest. It's the perfect spot to unwind in nature's very own hot tub. But for one unlucky family, what was supposed to be a peaceful pit stop turned into a real-life horror movie. On August 14, 1997, Patty McConnell, a Texas mom road tripping to Alaska with her kids, decided to take a much-needed break at the hot springs. The scenery was stunning, the water was warm, and the vibe was all about relaxation. Wanting to escape the crowds, Patty and her 13-year-old son Kelly wandered down a boardwalk, climbed a set of stairs, and found a quieter pool. Everything was perfect until it wasn't. Out of nowhere, a rustling in the bushes shattered the peace. Patty turned, and there it was, a massive black bear staring right at her. Before she could even react, the bear charged. In an instant, it tackled Patty, sinking its claws and teeth into her. Her terrified screams echoed through the forest as she fought for her life. Now, most 13-year-olds would probably freeze in terror, but not Kelly. This kid was made of pure courage. Grabbing the nearest tree branch, he started whacking the bear with everything he had. When that didn't work, he even kicked the bear in the face, a move that was as bold as it was risky. But the bear, furious and relentless, turned its attention to Kelly. With one powerful swipe, it clawed his neck, grabbed him by the waist, and hurled him to the ground like a rag doll. The chaos caught the attention of other visitors, including Ray Kitchen, a man who didn't hesitate to jump in and try to save the family. He fought with everything he had, but the bear's sheer strength was too much. In the struggle, the bear knocked Ray off the boardwalk, sending both of them tumbling down a hillside. Tragically, Ray didn't make it. The bear delivered fatal wounds to his neck, taking his life in the process. As panic spread through the park, another man tried to help and was critically injured in the attempt. It wasn't until two bystanders arrived with hunting rifles that the nightmare finally ended. They shot and killed the bear, but by then, the damage was done. Patty, despite her valiant effort to protect her son, didn't survive. Her bravery, however, was undeniable. Her final moments were spent fighting for Kelly. Miraculously, Kelly survived, though severely injured. His determination to battle a full-grown black bear and his incredible will to live turned him into a real-life legend. As for Ray Kitchen, his selflessness left a deep impact on everyone who heard his story. He ran toward danger without a second thought, an act of true heroism that cost him his life but saved others. The attack sent shockwaves through the region, sparking conversations about wildlife safety and the unpredictable dangers of nature. Wildlife officials later determined that the bear was emaciated and unusually aggressive, likely attacking out of pure desperation due to hunger or illness. Today, the Liard River Hot Springs is still a beloved destination, but the events of that tragic day haven't been forgotten. Warning signs about bear activity now stand as stark reminders of what happened, urging visitors to stay alert and respect the wild. Nature may be beautiful, but it doesn't play by our rules. And sometimes even the most peaceful oasis can turn into a battleground in the blink of an eye.
There are moments in life when courage is tested in ways no one could ever anticipate. For Quinn Swales, a seasoned British safari guide, that moment came in the vast wilderness of Zimbabwe's Hwange National Park. What started as an ordinary dawn safari, a chance for tourists to witness Africa's raw beauty up close, turned into a terrifying fight for survival. The 40-year-old guide was leading a group of tourists on foot, tracking lions through the golden grasslands. The air was still, the morning sun rising over the savannah. Then, in an instant, everything changed. A massive male lion, unpredictable, wild, and ready to strike, charged straight at them. It was an attack no one saw coming. Faced with the unthinkable, Quinn didn't run. He didn't panic. He did what true leaders do. He put himself between danger and those who depended on him. With every ounce of his training, he tried to distract the lion, to divert its lethal rage away from the terrified tourists. But nature is merciless. The beast overpowered him, mauling him to death in front of the group he had sworn to protect. The guests walked away unscathed because of him. His sacrifice wasn't just the act of a guide doing his job, it was the ultimate display of bravery, a final selfless decision to ensure others would live. And yet, the irony of it all cuts deep. The very park where he lost his life had been in the global spotlight just weeks before, when another lion, one known across the world, met his own violent end. Cecil, Hwanghae's most famous lion, had been illegally hunted by an American dentist in a killing that sparked international outrage. The 13-year-old predator, with his distinctive black mane and commanding presence, had been part of an Oxford University conservation study. But that didn't stop Walter Palmer from paying $50,000 to lure him out of the park's protected zone, shooting him with a bow and arrow, then tracking him for 40 agonizing hours before finally finishing the job with a rifle. Quinn Swales had admired Cecil. A keen photographer himself, he had even used a photo of the legendary lion as his Facebook cover image. And now, in a cruel twist of fate, he had fallen to one of Cecil's kind, another powerful male, acting on pure instinct. His death sent shockwaves through the safari and conservation world. Colleagues, friends, and tourists who had once walked beside him struggled to process the loss. One tribute, raw with grief, spoke of a man who had been living his dream, who had turned his back on a career as a pilot to embrace the wild, to guide others through the very landscapes he loved most. He had always been the one to share knowledge, to make others feel safe in the presence of Africa's most formidable creatures. But on that morning, in that brutal, heart-stopping moment, he was the one who had no escape. And yet, his final act was not of fear, but of heroism.
The discovery on Bell Mountain sent shockwaves through the quiet wilderness. A pair of young lives ended in the most brutal, inexplicable way. On March 8, 2025, a hiker stumbled upon the bodies of 19-year-old twin brothers, Qadir and Nazir Lewis, lying lifeless at the summit. Both had been shot. Just the day before, they had missed their 7 a.m. flight to Boston, where they were supposed to visit friends. Now they were gone, and the circumstances surrounding their deaths only deepened the mystery. Authorities quickly leaned toward a chilling explanation: murder-suicide. But to those who knew the twins best, that theory made no sense. Their family immediately pushed back, refusing to accept that one would turn on the other. They had been inseparable since birth, protective of one another in a way only twins could understand. They weren't just brothers, they were best friends. Their uncle, Rahim Bronner, struggled to make sense of the tragedy. "They love each other," he said. "I couldn't imagine them hurting each other because I've never seen them even get into a fist fight before. The very idea that one of them could have snapped and killed the other before turning the gun on himself felt impossible. Yet the facts refused to align. The twins had no history of violence, no struggles with mental health that anyone was aware of, and no known reason to be on that mountain in the first place. There was no suicide note, no alarming behavior in the days leading up to their deaths. The family was left with a chilling question: if they didn't do this to each other, then who did, and why? Their aunt, Yasmin Bronner, voiced what so many were thinking. "Something happened in those mountains, and we want answers," she said. She and the rest of the family couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was involved, pointing out one eerie detail. The brothers had never been to Bell Mountain before. They weren't hikers. They had no known connection to the area, and yet, somehow, they ended up there. Miles from the airport where they had last been seen, their plane tickets still tucked inside their wallets. It was as if they had vanished for a day, only to be found in a place that made no sense, under circumstances that made even less. The family also questioned how the twins got to Bell Mountain. It wasn't close to the airport, and neither of them had a car with them that day. If they hadn't planned to go there, then who took them? And more importantly, who was the last person to see them alive? Qadir and Nazir had dreams. They wanted to start their own clothing brand, a vision they had talked about for years. They had a strong support system, a family that would have noticed if something was wrong. None of it pointed to a tragic act of desperation. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation confirmed that autopsies had been completed, but the final forensic results were still pending. Without those answers, speculation only grew, fueled by the unsettling contradictions in the case. The family, desperate for clarity, launched a GoFundMe to cover funeral expenses, hoping that, at the very least, they could lay the twins to rest with dignity. For now, Bell Mountain holds its secrets. But for the Lewis family, one truth remains undeniable. Qadir and Nazir didn't go there alone. Someone led them up that mountain, and somewhere, that person still walks free. In the summer of 2011, a group of British teenagers set off on what was supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime, an epic, month-long Arctic expedition in the frozen wilderness of Svalbard, Norway. Organized by the British Schools Exploring Society, BSES, this trip promised a thrilling mix of science, survival, and snow. The teens were eager to witness the majestic polar bear in its natural habitat, study the effects of climate change, and make unforgettable memories. Unfortunately, what started as an awe-inspiring expedition quickly spiraled into a nightmare, one that tragically cost the life of 17-year-old Horatio Chappell, a bright young man with dreams of becoming a doctor. The group, consisting of 80 students, arrived in Svalbard filled with excitement. They were reassured by the trip organizers that strict safety measures were in place to keep them protected in one of the world's most extreme environments. Tripwires equipped with small explosive mines were set up around their campsite to deter wildlife, pen flares were on hand to scare off any unwanted visitors, and an adult leader carried a firearm, just in case. But as it turned out, those safety precautions weren't quite as foolproof as they seemed. Shortly after setting up camp, the group discovered some major problems with their equipment. First, there weren't enough pen flares to go around, leaving many students without a crucial line of defense. Then, they realized that some of the tripwires, the ones meant to detect and scare away approaching bears, were either faulty or improperly set up. To top it off, the group leader's firearm wasn't exactly modern. It was an old rifle, far from ideal for a life-or-death emergency. And then, in the early hours of August 5th, the worst-case scenario became a horrifying reality. A starving polar bear, likely struggling to find food due to the rapidly changing Arctic ecosystem, wandered into the campsite. Driven by desperation, it ignored its usual instinct to avoid humans, and instead saw an easy meal. The bear entered the camp undetected, creeping toward the tents where the teenagers were fast asleep. Then, all hell broke loose. The bear tore into Horatio's tent, launching a frenzied attack. One of his companions was bitten on the head before the bear turned its focus on Horatio. In the chaos, Horatio was dragged from the tent and brutally mauled, while his terrified friends scrambled for safety. The entire camp erupted in panic. Screams echoed across the icy landscape as the bear continued its rampage, injuring 4 other members of the expedition, including 2 adult leaders who desperately tried to stop the attack. But their outdated rifle wasn't exactly cooperating. They struggled to fire, desperately trying to take down the beast. After a tense and terrifying struggle, they finally managed to shoot and kill the bear, but it was too late. Horatio was gone. The news of the tragedy sent shockwaves across the world, raising serious questions about the safety protocols of such high-risk expeditions. A trip designed to inspire and educate had instead exposed the fatal consequences of poor planning. Faulty equipment, insufficient training, and an unreliable firearm had left the group vulnerable to one of nature's most powerful predators. For Horatio's family and friends, the loss was unimaginable. He was a bright, compassionate young man on the verge of adulthood, eager to make a difference in the world. His death became a heartbreaking reminder of the unpredictability of nature and the immense responsibility required when venturing into its domain. Horatio's story remains a chilling chapter in the history of exploration, a reminder that while the wilderness is breathtakingly beautiful, it is also ruthlessly unforgiving. Those who knew him continue to honor his memory, remembering his adventurous spirit and love for discovery.
The African wilderness had always called to her. It was the adventure of a lifetime, the grand journey she had promised herself, a final, unforgettable trip before her 80th birthday. But in the heart of Zambia's vast Kafue National Park, where the untamed beauty of nature stretches endlessly, her dream turned into a nightmare. Gail Matson had come to witness the raw majesty of the wild, to feel the pulse of the land beneath her, to see the great creatures of Africa in their natural domain. She had no way of knowing that one of those creatures would bring her story to a tragic end. The safari vehicle rumbled over uneven terrain, carrying its passengers through a landscape teeming with life. The sun painted the sky in shades of amber and gold as the group scanned the horizon, eager for a glimpse of the animals that roamed freely. Then, from the dense brush, movement. A massive bull elephant emerged, its towering form cutting through the foliage like a ghost of ancient times. At first, it was nothing unusual, just another breathtaking moment on an already extraordinary trip. The group watched in awe as the elephant moved with slow, deliberate steps. Cameras were raised, a moment to capture, a memory to keep. But something was wrong. The elephant's posture shifted, its ears flared. A deep, rumbling growl vibrated through the air, a sound that sent an instinctive shudder through anyone who heard it. Then, without warning, it charged. The vehicle came to a sudden halt. There was no time to escape, no route to safety. The elephant was too close, moving with terrifying speed, an unstoppable force of nature. A panicked gasp, a blur of movement, then impact. The massive tusk crashed into the side of the vehicle, sending it lurching violently. Metal groaned under the force. The world flipped upside down as the truck was overturned like a child's toy, rolling onto its side. Shouts filled the air, a chaotic mixture of shock and terror. Dust and debris rained down as the passengers scrambled, dazed and disoriented. And then silence. Gail lay still. The others around her stirred, groaning as they clutched their injuries, but she did not move. She had lived for adventure, but in this moment, adventure had taken her. The aftermath was a blur of frantic efforts. A guide shouting for help, injured passengers being tended to, a call for emergency assistance. But for Gail, there was nothing that could be done. Her journey had ended in the place she had dreamed of, but not in the way she had ever imagined. Her daughter, Rona Wells, would later confirm the unthinkable. Her mother, the woman who had always embraced life with an unbreakable spirit, had died in a tragic accident while living out her dream adventure. The footage of the attack, shared across social media, showed the brutal reality of what had happened. The enormous elephant, its fury unmatched, storming the vehicle and toppling it in mere seconds. The helplessness of those inside. The fragility of human life against the power of the wild. The company that had led the safari wilderness insisted that their guides were among the most experienced, the most well-trained. But on that fateful day, experience was no match for the unpredictability of nature. The terrain had blocked the escape route. There was no way out. It's extremely rare to see an elephant that irate, said Marlon Dutoit, a wildlife photographer and safari guide. Across Africa, thousands of tourists embark on safaris every day without incident, but nature follows its own rule. Gail's body would be returned home to the United States. With the support of local Zambian authorities and the U.S. Embassy, she had set out on what she called her last big trip, expecting to return with stories to tell. Instead, she became part of one. Friends remembered her for her adventurous soul. She told us this was going to be her last big adventure, said John Longaboth, a friend from Arizona. She was about to turn 80. She thought maybe it was time to slow down. But the wild does not slow down for anyone. In the vast landscapes of Africa, where nature reigns supreme, there are no guarantees. Even the most breathtaking journeys can take a turn into the unknown. And for Gail Matson, her final adventure became a haunting reminder of just how powerful and unpredictable the untamed world truly is.
The bitter cold of the Diaulatar Mountains was unforgiving that day, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones and makes every step a battle. For Tom Howard, a 27-year-old British hiker, and his friend, the trek had been meant as an adventure, an escape into the breathtaking beauty of the Himalayas, a challenge to push themselves against nature's raw and untamed power. But what they didn't know was that the path they had chosen was forbidden in the winter months. The risks were too great, the terrain too unstable, and soon they would pay the ultimate price for that mistake. They had set off on February 14th, trekking from Dharamkot towards the snow line via Triund, a popular yet treacherous route when the mountains were blanketed in ice and snow. The ascent had been challenging but exhilarating. The world stretched out beneath them in an endless sea of white, the silence only broken by the crunch of their boots on frozen ground. But the descent, where most tragedies occur, was where everything went wrong. Somewhere along the way, Tom lost his footing. Maybe the ice gave way beneath him, or perhaps he miscalculated his step. Whatever the reason, he fell. It wasn't just a slip, not something he could brush off with a laugh. His body slammed against the unforgiving rock and ice, ribs shattering on impact. The pain must have been unimaginable. Each breath a struggle, the cold gnawing at his exposed skin as his friend rushed to his side, helpless against the brutal force of nature. His friend, despite his own injuries, knew that time was running out. He left Tom behind and fought his way back down the mountain, desperate for help. The altitude made every breath a battle, but he pushed forward, driven by fear and determination. By the time he reached authorities, night had fallen and the temperature had plummeted even further. A rescue team was quickly assembled. Firefighters, police, and the State Disaster Response Force. They knew what they were up against. The mountain didn't care about urgency. It was a cruel, unyielding force that swallowed people whole if they weren't careful. The team moved as fast as they could, but the path was brutal. By the time they reached Tom, he was barely hanging on, his condition critical. The descent was agonizing. The rescuers placed him on a stretcher, but the icy terrain made every step a grueling struggle. It took them nearly 2 hours to cover just 100 meters. More teams were called in for reinforcement, pushing through the brutal landscape as they fought to get him down to safety. Hours turned into an entire day. And yet, despite all their efforts, despite the sheer willpower of those trying to save him, the mountain had already claimed its victim. Tom was finally brought to an ambulance, more than 24 hours after his fall. But it was too late. He was pronounced dead at the hospital, his body battered from the impact, his liver lacerated, his chest and abdomen ravaged by internal injuries. The fall had been from a significant height. There had never been a real chance. The news sent shockwaves through those who knew him. Tom had been more than just an adventurer. He had been brilliant, ambitious, a young man who had attended the prestigious Cranleigh School before going on to Durham University. He had earned a master's degree in natural sciences, carving out a promising future for himself at Quantexa, a financial security firm in London. He was someone who had his whole life ahead of him, a life that ended far too soon in the cold, isolated vastness of the Himalayas. Back in England, his family and friends were left reeling, struggling to make sense of the tragedy. The Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office extended their support, but no amount of words or condolences could undo what had happened. The mountains, as breathtaking as they are, do not forgive mistakes. In winter, when the world turns to ice and the air itself feels like knives against the skin, they become something else entirely, a silent predator waiting for one wrong step. Tom had unknowingly stepped into that danger, and like so many before him, he had not been able to escape. Picture this. It's March 5th, 2019, in the sleepy little village of Z, tucked away in the eastern Czech Republic, the kind of place where the loudest sounds are a rooster crowing or a tractor puttering along. That is, until Mikhail Prek arrived. Mikhail wasn't your average villager. At 34, he had gained a reputation, and not in a good way. His hobby wasn't something simple like fishing or woodworking. No, he had a passion that made people question his sanity, keeping lions. Not just one, but two, a male and a lioness. Why? No one knows. Maybe he watched The Lion King one too many times or just wanted to stand out. But owning these massive predators wasn't enough for him. He had bigger plans. He wanted to breed them. In his backyard, his enclosures, if you could even call them that, were more of a chaotic DIY project than a secure habitat. They were hastily thrown together, probably held up by sheer willpower. The problem? He had no permits. Authorities fined him, neighbors complained, yet Michael ignored them all. To him, these lions weren't just exotic pets, they were family. big 400-pound clawed and fanged family. But keeping lions wasn't his only eccentricity. He also walked them. Imagine strolling through a quiet village and seeing a man casually walking a lion on a leash like it's a golden retriever. What could possibly go wrong? Well, everything. One infamous incident involved a cyclist who collided with the lioness during one of these bizarre outings. He ended up in the hospital. Authorities, in an absurd twist, classified it as a traffic accident. For the villagers, however, it was just another terrifying reminder of the situation they were stuck in. Years passed with no resolution. The authorities wanted the lions removed, but legal loopholes and a lack of proper wildlife sanctuaries left them powerless. Meanwhile, Mikhail refused to cooperate. He blocked officials from accessing his property and stubbornly defended his lions. The villagers lived in constant fear, trapped in an unending standoff. Then came the morning of March 5th, 2019. At around 7 a.m., Mikhail's father made a horrifying discovery. His son's lifeless body was inside the male lion's cage. Even more disturbing, the door was locked from the inside. Why did Mikhail enter the enclosure? No one knows. What was clear was that authorities now had an even bigger problem. Mikhail's body was in a cage with two very alive, very dangerous lions. And here's the thing about lions. They're not oversized house cats. They are apex predators, built for the kill. No one was about to risk being the next victim. In the end, there was only one solution. Authorities had to shoot both lions to secure the scene. If that wasn't tragic enough, it was later discovered that the lioness was pregnant. Mikhail's shocking death put an abrupt end to his bizarre passion, but for the villagers it also brought relief. For years, they had lived in fear, unable to do anything about the man keeping deadly predators just beyond their fences. Now, at last, the nightmare was over. In the aftermath, the mayor of Z expressed hope that this tragedy would finally lead to stricter laws on keeping dangerous animals. And indeed, the Czech government began reassessing its wildlife regulations. The country had long been a hub for illegal wildlife smuggling, a reputation it could no longer afford to ignore. Mikhail Prek's story serves as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of what happens when humans blur the lines between domesticity and the wild. Lions belong in the savannah, not in someone's backyard.
There's an unspoken rule when visiting a wildlife park. Respect the boundaries between you and the animals. But sometimes, curiosity and excitement blur that line. And sometimes, nature reminds us just how thin the glass between life and death really is. It was supposed to be an unforgettable afternoon drive through South Africa's Lion Park, a chance to see the kings and queens of the wild up close. A 22-year-old American tourist and her male companion rolled through the sprawling enclosures, surrounded by lions roaming just meters away. Windows down, cameras ready, they leaned in to capture the perfect shot. Then, in an instant, everything changed. A lioness, her golden frame sleek and powerful, moved closer. At first, she seemed calm, just another magnificent predator blending into the sunlit savannah. But then, with terrifying speed, she lunged, claws scraping against metal, jaws snapping through the open passenger window. There was no time to react, no time to roll up the glass. The beast's massive jaws clamped down, dragging the young woman from her seat, pulling her from the illusion of safety into the brutal reality of the wild. Her companion fought desperately, struggling to pry her from the lion's grip, but it was too late. Park staff rushed to intervene, but by the time they reached the scene, the damage was done. The attack had been swift, merciless. The woman succumbed to her injuries before paramedics could save her. The man survived, wounded but alive. A cruel contrast. One moment they had been side by side, sharing an adventure. The next, she was gone. Authorities launched an investigation, as they always do when the untamed world reminds humanity of its place. She died unnaturally, a police spokesman stated, as if any death by a lion's jaws could ever be anything else. The park, a popular destination known for super close-up animal views, had seen incidents before. Just months earlier, an Australian tourist had been bitten in the leg after lowering his window. A 13-year-old boy had been attacked by a cheetah after sneaking through a fence. Warnings had been issued. Keep the windows up, stay inside the vehicle. But warnings are easy to ignore when the wild seems within reach, until it reaches back. The fate of the lioness remained uncertain. Would she be punished for following her instincts? The park's spokesman hesitated to answer, only offering condolences to the grieving family. But one thing was certain, this was no accident. It was a reminder, a brutal, tragic lesson that in the animal kingdom there is no such thing as a safe distance.
For months, her disappearance remained a haunting mystery. Sahila Sangrait, a 21-year-old woman with a bright spirit and dreams of a fresh start, vanished without a trace in August 2024. No signs, no clues, just silence. Her family held on to hope, replaying every last memory, grasping at any possible explanation. But deep down, an unshakable fear crept in. The longer she remained missing, the harder it was to ignore the dreadful possibility that something terrible had happened. Then, on March 4th, 2025, the worst possible news arrived. A hiker navigating the rugged, isolated terrain near Hill City made a grim discovery. A body, badly decomposed, abandoned in the wilderness. The remote location, the condition of the remains, the way she had simply vanished, it all pointed to something horrifying. The confirmation came soon after. The body was Sahila's. Her family's worst fears had come true. Their daughter, their sister, their friend, gone. And with that devastating truth came another. Someone had done this to her. But who and why? Authorities wasted no time. Days later, they arrested 24-year-old U.S. Air Force Airman Quintarius Chappelle. The charge? Second-degree murder. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community. Not just because Sahila had been killed, but because of where it had allegedly happened, Ellsworth Air Force Base, where Chappelle was stationed. How did she end up there? What happened behind those heavily guarded gates? And perhaps the most chilling question of all, how long had the truth been buried before her body was finally found? Sahila had been last seen in Eagle Butte, staying with a friend. She told them she planned to head back to Box Elder, the town where she was from, to grab some belongings before setting off on a long-anticipated trip to California. It was supposed to be a fresh start. Instead, it became the beginning of a nightmare. No one knows for sure what happened next. Did she ever make it to Box Elder? Or was she intercepted before she could get there? How did she end up at Ellsworth Air Force Base? And most disturbingly, was she held there for a time before she was killed? Authorities have yet to reveal the exact nature of Sahila's connection to Chappelle. Was he a friend, a boyfriend, someone she trusted? Or was this a chance encounter that spiraled into something horrific? The military has remained tight-lipped, offering little more than formal statements. But one sentence from the base's commander, Colonel Derek Oakley, stood out. A stark and chilling reminder of the weight of what had happened. "We hold airmen accountable for their actions," Oakley stated. "If service members are found in violation of military or civilian law, they will be punished." It was a careful, measured statement, one that suggested the Air Force was prepared to distance itself from Chappelle if he was convicted. But for Sahila's family, it wasn't enough. They didn't just want accountability, they wanted the full truth. Sahila was not just another name on a missing persons list. She was a daughter, a friend, a young woman with hopes, ambitions, and a future she was eager to chase. Those who knew her spoke of her as a mesmerizing presence, witty, intelligent, full of light despite the hardships she had endured. She had been dealt a difficult hand in life, but had met every challenge with resilience and a smile. That light, that resilience, had been stolen. As the case moves forward, her loved ones are left to grapple with unbearable grief and a mountain of unanswered questions. Why was she killed? What happened in the days after she vanished? Who else might have known the truth before her body was finally found? The investigation remains ongoing, involving a vast network of local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies, including the FBI and the Bureau of Indian Affairs Missing and Murdered Unit. Authorities are urging anyone with information to come forward, but for now, justice for Sahila remains just out of reach. In the wake of this tragedy, her family has created a GoFundMe to help cover funeral expenses, ensuring that Sahila, who was known to those closest to her as Shy, receives the farewell she deserves. The fundraiser paints a portrait of the woman she was, of a life filled with hope and kindness. Shy is a beautiful, inclusive, and mesmerizing spirit, it reads. She attacked life head-on with a smile on her face. Somewhere along the way, that light was extinguished. Someone made the decision to take her life, and now, those who loved her are left with only one hope, that the full truth will come to light, and that whoever is responsible for her death will finally answer for what they have done. A split-second decision, a predator lurking in the shadows. A family outing turned into a nightmare. On a scorching July day in 2016, what was supposed to be an exciting trip to Beijing's Battling Wildlife Park became the stuff of horror movies. This park, famous for its drive-through safari, lets visitors see majestic Siberian tigers up close, all from the supposed safety of their cars. But as it turns out, supposed safety only applies if you follow the rules. One tiny lapse, one moment of carelessness, and suddenly you're no longer a spectator. You're on the menu. It all started with a heated argument inside a car. Tensions were rising between a woman named Xiao and her family. Frustrated and likely wanting to make a point, she did something no one could have imagined. She opened the car door. Yes, in the middle of a tiger enclosure. Maybe she thought she was just stepping out for a breath of fresh air. Maybe she wasn't thinking at all. But the thing about tigers, they don't do timeouts. Before she could even process her mistake, the jungle came alive. From the shadows, a massive Siberian tiger launched itself at her with terrifying speed. In a flash, the 400-pound predator clamped its jaws onto her and began dragging her away. Screams erupted. Panic exploded inside the vehicle. Her family, frozen in horror, had only seconds to react. That's when Xiao's mother, in a desperate act of heroism, did what any mother would do. She ran straight toward the danger. But nature is ruthless. A second tiger, bigger, faster, and even more ferocious than the first, attacked. The impact was brutal. The beast took her down with a force so powerful it sent shivers through anyone who watched the footage later. She had no chance. Unlike Xiao, she wouldn't make it out alive. Every horrifying second was caught on security cameras. The footage, which eventually leaked online, left the world in shock. Viewers watched in horror as the tigers disappeared into the underbrush with their victims. By the time park officials and emergency responders arrived, the nightmare was over. Xiao, incredibly, survived. Severely injured, but alive. Her mother, tragically, did not. Her courageous attempt to save her daughter had cost her everything. The incident sparked immediate outrage and a flood of questions. The park had clear rules. Stay inside your vehicle. Keep the windows up. Lock the doors. Yet, Xiao later claimed she had no idea what she had signed before entering. According to her, she thought it was just a standard form, not a serious waiver warning about the lurking danger. Making matters worse, she accused the park of failing to respond in time. She insisted a park official in a nearby vehicle should have stepped in to help. That accusation sent shockwaves through China, with many pointing fingers at both the park's security measures and Xiao's own reckless mistake. But the real lesson? Mother Nature doesn't care about misunderstandings. Siberian tigers are apex predators. They're designed to hunt, overpower, and kill prey much larger than themselves. Once they lock onto a target, there's no reasoning, no mercy, only raw, primal instinct. A single misstep, a fatal moment of misjudgment, a mother who sacrificed herself in the ultimate act of love. Today, the tiger enclosure at Battling Wildlife Park remains open, but those who visit now do so with a renewed sense of caution, because if this tragedy proved anything, it's that in the wild, the rules aren't suggestions. And one wrong move, that's the difference between watching the tigers and becoming the main event.
There's a fine line between admiration and danger, and in the wild, crossing it can be fatal. in the heart of Zimbabwe's Mana Pools National Park, where the golden sun filters through ancient trees and the rhythmic sounds of nature fill the air. A group of tourists arrived, eager to witness Africa's most majestic creatures up close. They had come for adventure, for the thrill of seeing the untamed world in all its glory. But for one woman, that desire for the perfect photograph became a tragic, irreversible mistake. She had traveled thousands of miles, her excitement building with every mile of dusty road that brought her deeper into the wilderness. This was her dream, to stand in the presence of Africa's giants, to see elephants not behind the bars of a zoo, but roaming freely in the land they had ruled for centuries. When her group entered the park, fate brought them directly to what she had been hoping for, a herd of elephants, their massive frames moving slowly through the sun-baked landscape, their trunks swaying as they grazed. The sight was mesmerizing, almost surreal, but for her, observing from a distance wasn't enough. She wanted to capture the moment, to preserve it in a way that a simple memory never could. With a camera in hand, she made a fateful decision. She stepped out of the vehicle, moving closer to the herd, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and caution. Perhaps she believed she was still at a safe distance. Perhaps she thought the elephants, so often depicted as gentle, wouldn't mind her presence. Then everything changed. A single movement, one that no one could fully understand, set off a chain reaction that would end in horror. One of the elephants, a towering beast of unimaginable strength, suddenly stopped grazing. Its ears flared, its small eyes locked onto her, its massive body tensed. Something had unsettled it, something had pushed it too far. The charge was instant, a thunderous explosion of movement and fury, the air filled with the deep, earth-shaking roar of an elephant in distress, a sound that triggers a primal fear in anyone who hears it. The ground trembled as the massive creature closed the distance in seconds, its trunk raised, tusks gleaming in the sun. There was no time to react, no chance to retreat. A scream ripped through the air, then a sickening impact. The elephant struck with devastating force, knocking her to the ground before its enormous feet came crashing down. The world blurred into chaos, shouts from the other tourists, the pounding of hooves against the earth, the dust rising in thick clouds. When it was over, the silence was even more deafening than the attack itself. Park rangers rushed to the scene, but there was nothing they could do. The woman, once so full of life, so eager for adventure, lay still on the ground. Her injuries were too severe, her body too broken. She succumbed to them before the day was over. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the park, another grim reminder of the consequences of underestimating the wild. Tinashe Farawo, a spokesman for the Zimbabwe Parks and Wildlife Management Authority, spoke cautiously about the incident. No one knew for certain what had triggered the attack. Had it been her sudden movement, the sound of the camera, or was it simply a reminder that even the most peaceful-looking creatures have their limits? But one thing was clear, this was not an isolated incident. For every tragic story, there had been warnings. The rules were always the same. Keep a safe distance, stay in your vehicle. Remember that these are not creatures to be controlled. Yet time and time again, excitement and overconfidence led people to break those rules. And nature, indifferent to human curiosity, responded the only way it knew how. The tourists who had witnessed the attack would never forget what they had seen. The sight of the woman stepping forward, the elephant's sudden shift in demeanor, the devastating speed of the charge. For them, the wilderness would never again be just a place of beauty. It would also be a place of brutal, unforgiving reality. In the animal kingdom, there are no second chances. And for one tourist in Mana Pools, a single moment of awe became the last moment she would ever see.
The wind roared through Rhode Island that day, relentless and unforgiving. It tore through power lines, left entire neighborhoods in darkness, and even ripped the roof from a mill building in Taunton. It was the kind of storm that demanded attention, a force of nature that made people stop and take shelter. But for Edward Clish, a 62-year-old man from Uxbridge, Massachusetts, the wilderness had always been a place of peace, a refuge from the chaos of the world. On March 7, 2025, he set out on the Nipmuc Trail in Burrillville, Rhode Island, likely unaware of the danger looming above. It was a trail he had walked before, familiar and quiet, offering the kind of solitude only nature can provide. But as the wind howled through the trees, branches twisted and strained against the force, some bending, others breaking. One, massive and heavy, finally gave way. Hours passed before his family found him. The sight was devastating. Edward lay unresponsive beneath the crushing weight of a tree branch, his body battered by the very nature he had loved so deeply. There was no warning, no time to react. One moment, he had been walking through the wilderness, breathing in the fresh air, and the next, fate had intervened in the cruelest way possible. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, but the damage had already been done. He was taken to Landmark Medical Center in Woonsocket, but there was nothing more they could do. The windstorm that had left thousands without power had claimed a life. Investigators from the Burrillville Police Department and the Rhode Island Medical Examiner's Office are still piecing together the final moments of Edward's life. Was the tree already weakened, waiting for just the right gust to send it crashing down? Or was it simply a case of being in the wrong place at the worst possible moment? The uncertainty only adds to the tragedy. It's a terrifying reminder of how unpredictable nature can be, how a peaceful walk can turn deadly in an instant. But Edward Clish's story is not just one of tragedy. Those who knew him refused to let his final moments define him. He was a man of adventure, a spirit drawn to the beauty of the world around him. He embraced life, stepping into each new day with curiosity and warmth. His obituary captured what those closest to him knew best. His presence was a beacon of joy, his impact immeasurable. He will not just be remembered in words, but in the places he loved: the winding trails, the rustling trees, the crisp morning air of the wilderness. His spirit lingers there, in the quiet moments of nature's beauty, in the whispering wind that carries his memory forward.